All right, let's talk about the fundamentals of JavaScript. But we're going to skip the usual textbook stuff and get right into what's actually happening under the hood.
So we all write and run JavaScript, but what's really going on when you execute a script? It's definitely not magic. Your code isn't just floating around in space. It's running inside a very specific, carefully designed environment, usually right there in your browser.
And this is it. This is the machine that brings your code to life, the JavaScript runtime environment. This whole diagram is pretty much the answer to our question. You see, it's not just one single thing, but a whole team of different components all working together.
So let's step inside that engine room. This is where the code you write gets turned into the actions you see on a screen. And it doesn't matter if that's in your browser or running on a server.
Think of this whole system as having four main players. Right at the heart of it all is the JS engine. It's got a call stack to keep track of what's running right this second, and a memory heap for storing all your variables and data. Then, the browser gives you a bunch of web APIs. These are your tools for things like touching the DOM or making network requests. To handle tasks that come in, you've got a callback queue. And the one directing all the traffic? That's the event loop. It's the traffic cop of this whole operation, deciding what code gets to run and when.
Now, this comparison is super important. On the left, you see the browser runtime, and it's packed with all those web APIs for the DOM, timers, and so on. But then you look at a server-side runtime like Node.js on the right. It's got the same core JS engine, but notice what's missing. All those browser-specific APIs are gone. This is a really fundamental idea. The environment you're in dictates what your JavaScript can actually do.
And it's not like there's just one engine either. We hear about Google's V8 all the time because it's in Chrome and Node, but it's far from the only player. Firefox runs on SpiderMonkey, Safari uses JavaScript core. Each one has its own little optimizations and quirks, but at the end of the day, they all do the same basic job. They execute JavaScript code.
Okay, so we've seen where the code runs. Now let's look at the code itself, starting with the absolute building blocks of the language, variables and types.
JavaScript has a handful of these fundamental or primitive data types. You know, numbers, strings, booleans, that kind of thing. But here's the real secret. The one thing you really have to get about JavaScript. Everything else is an object. I'm serious. Arrays, functions, dates, deep down, they're all just objects with some extra bells and whistles. That one idea explains so much about the language's behavior.
You know, for a long time, var was all we had for variables. And frankly, it was kind of the Wild West. It was function scoped, which meant it didn't just live inside a block of code, it lived inside the entire function. This caused all sorts of weird bugs. Let and const, which came later, were designed to fix this. They are block-scoped, meaning they only exist within the curly braces they're defined in. It's just so much more predictable, which is why you almost never see var in modern code.
So we have our primitive types. Now let's see how JavaScript groups them together into the two most common data structures you're ever going to use, objects and arrays.
JavaScript arrays are, well, they're a little different. They are incredibly flexible. Some people might even say too flexible. Unlike in a lot of other languages, you can mix and match data types, leave empty spots, and they can hold literally anything, even other functions. They're also what we call sparse. So if you put a value at indexed 100,000, the browser is smart enough not to waste memory on the 99,099 empty slots before it. It's efficient, but yeah, it's also a little strange.
And this slide right here perfectly proves that everything is an object rule we talked about. I mean, why on earth can you just tack a named property onto an array like this? Because an array is an object. It's just a special kind of object where the keys happen to be numbers. This is a core, fundamental truth about JavaScript, for better or for worse.
Okay, we've got our data. Now we need the verbs, the code that actually manipulates that data and responds to what the user is doing. And this is where functions and the whole event-driven nature of JavaScript really shine.
Let's trace what happens when a user clicks something. And let's use that runtime model we saw earlier. So, a user clicks a button. The function for that click, the event handler, it doesn't run right away. Instead, it gets put in a line, the callback queue. All the while, the event loop is constantly checking in on the call stack, basically asking, "You busy? You busy?" The instant the call stack is empty, the event loop grabs that click handler from the queue, pushes it onto the stack, and then, finally, it gets executed. This whole dance is the secret to how JavaScript can handle so many things at once without just freezing up the browser. And of course, it's not just about clicks. JavaScript is constantly listening for all kinds of events. The mouse moving, keys being pressed on the keyboard, the page finishing its load, the window getting resized. This event-driven nature is really the fundamental difference between a plain old static document and a truly interactive web application.
Look, no language is perfect, and JavaScript, which you have to remember was famously designed in just 10 days, it has some serious quirks. So let's just be honest about it and take a look at a few of the gotchas that will absolutely trip you up at some point.
Here are 3 big ones you really have to watch out for. First, undefined is not the same thing as null. Undefined means a variable exists, but it just has no value yet. Null means you deliberately gave it a value of nothing. It's a subtle but important difference. Second, JavaScript doesn't do function overloading. If you write 2 functions with the exact same name, the last one just wins. It completely overwrites the first one. And this last one, oh man, this is a classic source of some really painful bugs.
And this is the danger. If you forget to declare a variable with let, const, or even var, JavaScript doesn't throw an error. It tries to be helpful and just creates a global variable for you. And that means any other script running on the same page can see it, and worse, can change it. Just like the quote says, this leads to these horrible conflicts that are an absolute nightmare to debug.
And all this really leads to the central philosophical question of JavaScript, doesn't it? Is all this flexibility, the fact that you can treat arrays like objects, that variables can change type whenever they want, is that a feature that enables incredible creativity, or is it a bug that just creates fragile, hard-to-maintain code? The honest answer is, it's both. And learning how to navigate that trade-off, that's what being a JavaScript developer is all about.